In today's lesson, we'll be introducing ourselves to all the different question types that you might see during the IELTS General Reading Test. We're not going to deep dive into examples of them all, but this is more of an overview and an introduction to show you some of the key questions. And I'll sort of describe what these questions are. We'll also talk about more common questions that you might get. And we'll also identify some of the questions which you probably won't see. So there are different frequencies of how often you'll see questions within IELTS reading. So let's begin. So first up, we'll begin with the very common question types and multiple choice. Now, this is something that I can pretty much guarantee everyone will see an example of a multiple choice question within their test. Choose the correct letter, ABC or ABCD, for each answer. I don't think I need to explain that in too much detail, but you basically get 3 or 4 options and you have to choose the right answer based on the information from the text. Next up, we have identifying information. There's a few different kinds of sort of identifying style questions, but identifying information in the given passage is maybe a question that's asking you to find specific details, whether it's looking for dates or just giving an answer against some information in the text. Matching information, so you'll be given some statements and then you have to match these statements with correct information in the passage. So this is kind of a common question that you'll see as well, basically matching statements against what you have read. Again, matching headings. So matching is another kind of common question type. Matching headings is basically you'll be given a list of headings depending on how many paragraphs there are in the text. Imagine you're given a text that has 5 paragraphs. You might be given 5, possibly a couple more actually, different headings. And then these headings need to describe each paragraph correctly. So you're basically making subheadings for paragraphs. That's very common as well. Students often find it a little bit difficult to do that, but you're basically matching subheadings to paragraphs in the text. And next up we have matching features. So matching features is more about being given some information and then you have to match that against information from the text. Imagine that we have a text where there's lots of names and people within the passages. Maybe the features will be the people and you'll have to match statements that describe each person accurately, again based on the information within the text. Now, what I'll say is at this point is don't stress about understanding 100% the differences and the similarities between each question type. This is just to give you an idea of what questions you will see, and it prepares you so that when we actually do a practice test that you'll sort of have an idea about what's coming up. But right now, don't stress yourself about understanding exactly what each question is like, because also sometimes the questions are tweaked slightly depending on the exam. But overall, we can say these 14 question types are pretty common and a good way of thinking about how we might approach the test depending on questions. Okay, so here we have 5 examples of very common question types. I'd probably say multiple choice and matching headings, matching information as well. They're very common for sure. Multiple choice, you're pretty much guaranteed to see that in a test. Okay, let's take a look at the next question set, which is matching sentence endings. So this kind of is exactly what it says, basically. You'll be given a sentence and then you have to match it to the correct ending. So you're given all this and you've got to match them up together. Then we have sentence completion. Another pretty common type of question. You've got to complete the sentences with the information from the passage, copying directly the language from the passage. So you can just lift words from the text straight into your answers. Okay, next up, and you can see it's in orange, summary, note, table, flowchart, diagrams, kind of completion. So sometimes, not that often, and I might even say almost quite rarely, you'll get some kind of pictorial image or a diagram, and you've basically got to fill in some missing information that you can find, of course, within the passage. But it's not often seen. You won't see this too often in your tests. However, it's good to know that you might do so that you're not surprised if it does come up. And another kind of 50-50, not too often you'll see this. And again, it's just similar to the other one, diagram label completion. So that last question was like tables and flowcharts. This one is the diagram label completion. So you'll be given a diagram, you've got to fill in the blanks, much like summary, note, table, flowchart. Diagram completion, again, you're probably not going to see it, but there's a possibility. It's not super rare, but there's a possibility. And next up, we have short answer questions. Super common in IELTS reading tests. And it is just basically as shown. So the question will say, answer in 1, 2, or 3 words. And basically, you can just take that number of words from the passage and put it in for your answer. So short answer questions. Okay, and then we have true, false, not given. In my experience, lots of students get quite confused with this question. And I think often it's because of the similarities between false and not given. And it is a bit tricky, but once you've practiced it a few times, you'll definitely improve on it. At first, it's a bit tricky for sure. But just as the question says, it'll give you some statements, and is each statement true, false, or not given based on the information in the passage. And here we have a rarer question type, identifying the writer's views, claims. This really does not come up very often. It's very rare, but it's good to sort of know that there's a small possibility. Identify the opinions or claims expressed by the writer. I will probably bet that almost none of you will see this question type. However, it is one of the question types, so it's good for us just to know. Yes, no, not given. Probably less rare than identifying writers' views, but sometimes yes, no, not given is used, and it's very similar to true, false, not given. Yes, no, not given, true, false, not given. Very similar. But more often than not, the question type is true, false, not given instead of yes, no, not given. Here we have information matching. So paragraph matching specific information to correct paragraphs in the text. It's not about subheadings, it's about statements and information. Again, this often doesn't come up. Okay, so just to highlight again, we have common, sometimes, and rarely, and I might say, to be honest, very rarely for those question types in green. Some of the question types are much more common, like multiple choice, very common, short answer questions, very common, matching headings, yeah, you'll probably see something like that. But it's just good for us to understand that really, these are the common question types and some of the slightly more rarer question types as well. So we will be practicing some of this throughout the remainder of the course, but it's good for us to have an understanding of these question types right now in order to build towards acing the IELTS reading general test.